So good morning, or whatever time of day it is for you, and welcome to Philosophy Live. I'm Graham Blackbourn from the Scottish branch of the School of Philosophy and Economic Science in Edinburgh. Thank you for joining me. Why do we converse with anyone? Of course, there are various reasons. We might be speaking to someone serving in the local cafe, or having a convivial conversation with a neighbour. Perhaps we're trying to cheer up a friend going through a difficult time, or chatting with our family around the dinner table. I'd guess that the philosopher Socrates, living in Athens in the 5th century BC, engaged in all of these types of conversation. But he's especially known for what came to be called Socratic dialogue, in the pursuit of understanding. Plato recorded that Socrates had been puzzled by an assertion of the Delphic oracle, who was never known to lie, that there was no man wiser than he. Socrates thought he was not wise at all, so he engaged in conversation with people who were regarded as wise, questioning them in order to find out about their wisdom. He began by quizzing a prominent politician, but he decided that, though this person thought himself wise, he didn't know anything worthwhile. Socrates then tried the same test on poets who were regarded as wise, but he decided that, although some of them wrote inspirational poetry, none could really explain what it meant, and though they thought the beauty of their poetry made them wise in all manner of ways, Socrates could find no such wisdom within them. I'm rather reminded of famous writers, actors and the like today, who because of their celebrity think that they're qualified to pronounce on various political and social matters. Lastly, Socrates went to the artists and the craftsmen, and to cut a long story short, found much the same with them. In the end, Socrates concluded that the oracle was right after all. For although the politicians, poets, and craftsmen had a certain ability in their own fields, that did not make them wise as such, although they thought they were. Socrates didn't think he was wise at all, but since he didn't believe he was, he decided that this gave him an edge over the others, and that this must have been what the oracle meant. So what's this got to do with Socratic dialogue? Well, firstly, Socrates had set out to discover the truth behind a puzzle. He knew the oracle would never lie, but he didn't understand how what the oracle had said could be true, that there was no man wiser than he. He began by acknowledging that he didn't know the answer, and rather than sit at home and try to puzzle it out, he went out and spoke with people, engaged them in dialogue, asking them questions. He listened to their answers, reflected on them, and then asked further questions about anything he didn't understand. So gradually some sort of understanding dawned, and this is a hallmark of Socratic dialogue. Plato wrote various works in which Socrates engaged in just such discussion. Let's briefly take the dialogue Laches as an example. In this dialogue, Socrates found himself amongst several aging generals who were discussing how best to educate their sons, and wondering whether learning to fight in armour is a good education. Socrates was asked what he thought, and he answered that he was younger and less experienced than the others, and he would rather first listen to what they had to say, and if he then had anything to add, he would do so. Two of the generals, Nicias and Laches, then described at length their opinions on the educational value of fighting in armour, and then they asked Socrates again what he thought. Socrates maintained that he knew nothing about it, but he did get the generals to acknowledge that they should first ask what the aim of any education is, and with some prompting they agreed that fundamentally it's about the care of the souls of those being taught. Socrates was not known for making philosophical assertions. He just questioned, so that the other party was forced to examine his or her own thinking, sometimes discovering it to have been invalid. This is how Socratic dialogue proceeds. So in the Laches, having agreed that the true aim of education is the care of the soul, Socrates' questioning led to agreement that this requires the teaching of virtue, and that the particular virtue which fighting in armour might teach is courage. But what, Socrates asked, is courage? Laches reckoned that that was easy, suggesting that courage is not running away when in battle. Socrates gently explained that this is just an example of acting courageously, and not an answer to what courage is in itself. With further questioning, and I'm simplifying it here, it was recognised that courage includes a certain knowledge. There may, for example, be occasions when to run off is the wisest action, and there'll be nothing virtuous in doing otherwise, and knowledge is needed to tell when that might be. But what sort of knowledge does courage require? Not, they agreed, the knowledge needed for flute playing, or healing, or farming. This led to an inquiry into the nature of knowledge, and so the discussion went on. And after a long conversation, each agreed that they had discovered a great deal about courage, even though they had still not been able to say what courage is. So they decided to leave the question open. As to how boys should be educated, the generals thought that Socrates would be the best teacher. But Socrates disagreed, suggesting that first they, Socrates and the generals, needed to find for themselves the best teacher, adding that what I don't advise is that we remain as we are, and that they should join together in looking after both their own souls and those of the boys. So they all agreed to meet the next day to make further plans, and that was the end of the dialogue. Like many Socratic dialogues, this one is inconclusive. It was decided neither whether fighting in armour is good for education, nor what courage is. Yet by the end, they all agreed that they had learned a great deal and refined their understanding. But the original question about education remained open, and they agreed they needed to continue seeking out the answer. So what can we learn from this? Well, Socratic dialogue, sometimes called dialectic, or by the more arcane term elenchus, is now regarded as one of the most effective means of coming to understand anything, and not just philosophical understanding. Like Socrates, it's best to come to the inquiry from the standpoint of not knowing, so that we're not projecting our existing opinions and preconceptions, which may or may not be correct, onto the subject. This will also help us to put the truth first, since if we already have strong opinions on, or vested interests in something, it's a lot harder to look at whatever it is afresh. Then we need to listen to others, question them, and be prepared to be refuted if shown to be wrong. Be careful not to reach conclusions prematurely. It's almost always possible to refine our understanding further. And most of all, as Socrates and the others agreed at the end of their conversation, recognize that we can all benefit from continuing to seek out the truth, even into our old age. At present, as we all know, it's too easy to gain our opinions and understanding through unreliable sources, including fake news from social media, which can be reinforced through the echo chambers of chat rooms and the like. So it's more important than ever to find reliable ways of testing our understanding of whatever it is we think we know. Perhaps rather than social media, or even AI, Socratic dialogue should be the future of communication. This was how philosophical discourse was conducted nearly 2,500 years ago. And whatever it is we wish to discover, Socrates remains an excellent guide as to how to go about it. So here's how philosophy might help us today. And thank you. Philosophy Live is on every Friday morning during the term at the same time. We hope to see you next week for a new philosophical gem. Thanks again. Have a good day and enjoy your weekend.